Imagine being told that a car company knew their vehicle would explode in a crash, but decided it was cheaper to pay off the victims than to fix the flaw. This wasn't a movie, it was reality. Ford's Pinto was advertised as the ultimate affordable small car, but behind the scenes, it was a $2,000 death trap. We're diving into the scandal that valued human lives at just $11. How did a global giant justify burning its own customers? We'll trace the history from the drafting board to the courtroom. You'll see the secret, memos that shocked the world, and the engineering decisions that cost lives. This is the story of the Ford Pinto, a disaster that forced the automotive industry to change forever. We'll look at the engineering flaws, the corporate greed, and the day Ford finally faced justice. The math behind their decision is something you won't believe. It's a tale of arrogance that turned a simple car into a firebomb. By the end, you'll understand why this remains the most controversial corporate scandal in history. Let's start the investigation into the truth behind the flame. The Pinto was born out of a race against time. Ford wanted a car under 2,000 pounds and under $2,000. In their desperation to beat the competition, engineers made a fatal error. They placed the fuel tank behind the rear axle, leaving almost no protection in a rear-end collision. Tests proved that even at low speeds, the tank could rupture and ignite. But the management ignored the warnings. They were obsessed with the schedule. Every department was pressured to shave off weight and cost. The integrity of the fuel system was sacrificed for the sake of the profit margin. This wasn't an accident. It was a choice. The engineers knew the risks, but they were silenced by the corporate culture. They were pushing a product that was inherently dangerous, but the marketing machine kept the narrative of safety and style alive. It was a ticking time bomb waiting for a minor accident to detonate. Every single unit leaving the factory carried this deadly flaw, unknown to the families driving them home. The pursuit of the perfect budget car had blinded them to the most basic human safety needs. It was an engineering disaster fueled by corporate hubris. The most damning piece of evidence was the infamous internal memo. It contained a cold-blooded cost-benefit analysis. Ford calculated that fixing the fuel tank would cost about $11 per car. Then, they compared that to the projected cost of lawsuits from people killed or injured in fires. They decided it was cheaper to pay the legal settlements than to pay for the fix. The document clearly assigned a dollar value to human life. It was a business decision made in the interest of the bottom line, completely devoid of morality. When this memo leaked to the public, the backlash was nuclear. It wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about a company that thought it could put a price tag on a human soul. The evidence proved they were aware of the danger long before the first fire broke out. They had the solution on the table, and they consciously chose to ignore it for profit. This revelation turned a technical failure into a moral crime in the eyes of the public. It destroyed the trust between the manufacturer and the consumer, exposing a systemic rot at the top of the organization. The memo became the smoking gun that defined the entire scandal, changing the way corporations would be viewed forever. As the lawsuits flooded the courts, Ford finally couldn't hide from reality. Families who had lost loved ones in horrific rear-end collisions stood up to the corporate giant, demanding justice. For years, Ford tried to stonewall these cases, using their massive legal department to wear down the plaintiffs. But the truth was becoming impossible to suppress. Every new trial brought more incriminating evidence to light, showing a pattern of negligence that spanned years. Public outrage reached a breaking point, and the pressure on Ford to recall the vehicles became a national campaign. The company's legal strategy shifted from defense to desperate damage control. Even the government began to scrutinize Ford's safety data with an intensity that had never been seen before. It was a humiliating collapse of Ford's public image, dragging their reputation through the mud in the court of public opinion. Every day in court was a victory for the victims, proving that no company is above the law when human lives are at stake. The lawyers for the families were relentless, piece by piece rebuilding the truth of what Ford had known. This was the moment the giant finally had to answer for its choices in front of the whole world. The recall that followed was one of the largest in automotive history. Millions of Pintos were eventually pulled off the roads to have safety modifications installed, but for many, it was far too late. The cost of human life, which Ford had so casually estimated at $11, turned out to be priceless in the eyes of justice. Settlements and legal fees cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars, far exceeding the initial $11 fix they had once refused to pay. It was a staggering financial lesson on the price of negligence. Beyond the money, the damage to Ford's brand equity took decades to repair. They were forced to rebrand their image. Focusing on quality is job one, to try and regain consumer confidence. But the scars of the Pinto scandal remain deep in the corporate memory. It served as a permanent stain, a constant reminder of what happens when a company loses its moral compass. Many executives who were involved moved on, but the stories of the families impacted by the Pinto fires lived on forever. This was the true cost of their calculation A. Legacy defined by preventable tragedy and corporate shame that no marketing campaign could ever truly erase. Today, the Ford Pinto remains a critical lesson in why we have rigorous automotive safety standards. The industry was forced to evolve, implementing mandatory crash tests, improved fuel system designs, and stricter government oversight. We now live in an era where safety is a primary engineering pillar, and we owe that progress to the tragic lessons learned from the Pinto. It wasn't just a failure of a car. It was the catalyst for a safer future for every driver on the road. The story of the Pinto is a reminder that we must always question corporate power and hold manufacturers accountable. What do you think? Has the industry really learned its lesson? Or are companies still making dangerous trade-offs today? I want to hear your perspective in the comments below, as this is a conversation that needs to continue. If this deep dive opened your eyes, make sure to like and subscribe to stay part of our history series. There are more mysteries to uncover, and your support keeps this series going. Thank you for joining me for this difficult but necessary look at the past. We'll see you in the next one, where we tackle another massive automotive secret.